Yeah, it was got to x squared bracket, and then the one that had minus, it was most of the time it was a different way, so you can factorize that further. And as I'm taking these two figures like this, an extension, right? Because it becomes to the power of 4. But if you can recognize that it looks like a trinomial, right? It has the properties of a trinomial that you can factorize. So what I mean by that is that you have an x to the 4 and an x squared and a constant. So this exponent is double that exponent, right? That is actually what makes it a factorizable trinomial. And then you have to have that constant term as well. Yeah. Exponential fractions, yes, quadratic equations, no. Okay, guys, are there any questions on these 6? I will just take you to the list and post it on Classroom as well for the people that are not here. So if you are going to class, you can touch it there. All right, number 4, these were grouping questions. And again, guys, grouping questions, you can get given these into their test, right? In a 4 test, you need to be able to do grouping. These grouping questions are just a little bit more complicated, I suppose, but I mean, this is like a perfect 4 question, right? This is fine. When you're grouping the first 2, you're grouping the last 2, then you have a difference of 2 squares, and then you factorize. Right, you can absolutely get something like that on Tuesday in the 4th test. Any of these, actually, the only ones that were quite tricky in the sense that the ones that you have to group together weren't necessarily next to each other are the last 3. So in D, you can see that I just underlined the ones that I was going to group. Remember, guys, the purpose of grouping is to get a common bracket. The purpose of grouping is to get a common bracket. So if you group those 2 and those 2 together, you're not going to get a common bracket. Okay, even though you have a common factor, you have to have a common bracket. So I grouped those 2 together as a difference of 2 squares. And then I grouped those 2 together just as a w minus x. And then I was able to go from there. What? C, yes? Oh.
Yeah, so
Oh.
When we found
Okay, but that's good. Let me just comment on that, guys. For C, I took out an x cubed from the first 2. I took out an x cubed from the first 2 terms and then a negative 9x from the next 2. Then when you're taking out the common factor, yes, it's the x plus 4, but do we notice that there's also an x as a common factor there? All right, so that's why I took out x plus 4. All right, and then I was left with an x squared minus 9. Now, if you wanted to do it differently, if you didn't notice that x, that's a common factor there, right? So from here, you could have said, okay, I'm taking out my x plus 4, and then I'm left with an x cubed minus 9x. Right, so that's a typical thing, like what happened in the test. I think many of you would have left it like that, right? But you need to check in your second bracket, can we all see that there's an x as a common factor there? So you have to take that x out. All right, so then you would have to say x plus 4, and then from here, you're now dividing each term by x, right? Because you're taking out the common factor of x from there. So it's x squared minus 9, and then that you will have to factorize further again to get your difference of 2 squared. And again, guys, the question like this would have a high mark allocation. So that is a hint, right? That is actually going to tell you that you need to do quite a bit of factorizing. Now for E, I'm going to confess that this one sounds cool for a bit. I looked at it, hey? So I looked, and it took me a while to get to what I had to do here. So then I thought, okay, let me just try something. Let me just take out an x cubed there. I have an x minus 1. Then I saw, okay, here, this kind of looks like a trinomial, right? Negative 4x squared plus 2x plus 2. That looks like a trinomial. So, okay, let's take out a negative 2. and then I was left with that. And then from here, I was able to factorize that trinomial, which eventually allowed me to get a common bracket. Okay, so this was a tricky one. Again, guys, something that you could get in the test. I don't think you will get something like that because it will count a lot of marks and not many people will get it, I think. But it is doable, all right? It's just, yeah, it's a difficult one. So once I factorize that trinomial, I got those two brackets, and then we can clearly see that now we have an x minus 1 as a common bracket. So that goes to the front. When I take away the x minus 1 from my first term, I'm left with x cubed minus 2 times 2x plus 1 from the second term. And then this, guys, you would just have to multiply in. And then also, whatever you're getting in this bracket, check. Can you factorize it again? All right, in this case, you couldn't, I don't think. I did check, but that's not a trinomial, right? It's an x cubed. Okay, it's not an x cubed. And then F was similar, but also, yeah, not really as hectic as the previous one, but the grouping was a bit strange. So if you group those outer ones together, that would give you a difference of 2 cubes. And when you group the inner 3 terms together, that actually gives you a trinomial, right? So what I did, let me actually underline it with the correct colors. So this was when I actually grouped together the x cubed minus y cubed, which is a difference of 2 cubes, and I factorized it. That's what I got. Right, does that make sense? And then this trinomial here, this is also a difficult one to factorize because it has x's and y's. But just look at that. That trinomial, when you factorize it, it's actually x minus y, this one. Right? You need an x squared from the first term and a y squared from your last term. Okay, so it has to be x minus y, and then from this you have an x minus y as a common bracket. Okay, so guys, in an AP test exam, absolutely you can expect something like this, definitely. Right? I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just letting you know. But in a core test, I think probably D would be like a tricky one. But sometimes in core tests, they do have ones where you have to do like a difference of 2 squares and a trinomial, for example. But then they'll actually have them in the correct order. Okay, it won't be like here, where you have to look for, oh, a difference of 2 cubes and a trinomial. And then usually the actual factorizing that you must do after you've grouped, that factorizing is a bit simpler as well. Are there any questions on these ones? Okay, let's look at number 5. And this took me about 7 hours to do. It's wrong. So they said that you had to use what did they say? Substitutions if you wanted to, but you don't always have to do it. So in some cases I did, and others I didn't. Yeah.
I think it's
So yeah, you didn't have to do substitutions. In some of them, I think doing the substitution would have taken a bit longer. But guys, if we're looking at this, I'll show you now in C. That's the first place where I use the substitution. In A, I don't think you needed to use a substitution for this, right? We can see that we have 3 brackets. They're all very similar. That middle one just needs to do a switch around, right? So that's what I did for that one. I changed the plus 2ab to a minus 2ab. And then I had my common bracket, took it out. And then this now, guys, please. This is now again a trinomial. Okay, so this trinomial a squared minus 2ab plus b squared is a minus b, a minus b. Okay, so please let's learn from that top. All right, where quite a few of you lost marks for not factorizing further. Whenever you're done whenever you think you're done factorizing, just check your brackets again. All right, see whether you can factorize it. So in this case, this trinomial could be factorized to that. All right, the second one was similar in the sense that again we have the three brackets. The middle one you just have to do a switch on. Then you could take that out as a common bracket. And we were left with these three terms. And guys, in this case, both of these brackets could be factorized further. Okay, so the x squared minus 1 became x plus 1, x minus 1. And this trinomial, you have to factorize to that. 2x minus 3, x plus 1. Yeah. So this x squared minus 1 can put it there. Oh, yes, yeah, you could. No, you don't have to. Yep. All right, are we fine with this one, guys? Okay, C and D, those are the questions where I actually did use substitution. And the reason for that is, if you're looking at this, right, it almost looks like we have a common bracket. But then what about the minus 3? Okay, the minus 3 doesn't have that bracket attached to it. So it's not a traditional common bracket type question. Okay, so now you need to look at this and realize, oh, I have a bracket squared minus 2 times that same bracket and then a constant term. This is actually a very complicated trinomial. Okay, because we have that bracket squared and then we have that same bracket to the power of 1. Right, which is what happens in a trinomial. In a trinomial, you have a variable squared, and then a variable to the power of 1, and then you have a constant term. Okay, so to make it easier for you, you can introduce any variable. I'm not sure what they used in the textbook. Did they also use K? Yeah. All right, they also use K. And guys, this is actually a method that we teach at the beginning of the year in grade 11 4. All right, we call it K method. When you have a complicated equation or expression, then you can substitute something that is repeated with a different variable. All right, so if we say that K is going to be equal to this bracket, then look how simple that actually becomes. Right, because then the bracket squared becomes K squared, minus 2 times the bracket becomes minus 2K, and then minus 3. And isn't that an easy trinomial to factorize? Right, so if you factorize that, you get K minus 3, K plus 1. But this can't be our final answer, guys. All right, because there is no K in the actual expression that was given. Once we factorize, we now need to replace the K's with the actual thing that we made K equal to. Now, so x squared minus 2x minus 3 and x squared minus 2x plus 1. Yes? I'm sure you are. This could teach the form. And now, guys, unfortunately, we had to factorize that again, both of them, right? Because they were now both trinomials again. You could do this without even introducing K at all. If you can. Yeah. It's just like a tool to make it a bit simpler. That you can go straight from that to that, and then you can. When it's something like this, so when you can see that it's kind of a complicated trinomial,
Can you kind of use the K method whenever you do this? Yeah, can we do it in four?
yes.
And then is the x minus 1 squared because of the same sign? So the x plus 1 is 1. X. Yes.
Okay, guys, then I do the same thing in D. That's the other question. Okay. In D, I did the same thing. Do we notice there again, x squared minus x is repeated? And there's no x squared minus x in the third term, right? So it's not a normal common bracket type question. So I made K equal to that expression. That gave me that trinomial, which I could factorize. And then you have to put back, you have to replace those K's again with what we made K equal to. And then again, oh, that one I was actually trinomial that we can't factorize, right? Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
So the factors of 4, and when we add those factors, it's going to get -1. All right, we can't do that. But that second trinomial was one that we could factorize. Now, guys, in something like E, you could even use a substitution if you wanted to, right? I didn't because I felt like I could do it without, and I'm sure you guys also can do this one without. So if you wanted to, you could let k be equal to x minus 1. Right? Just Jonathan, to answer your question, when you know that you need to use substitution, when it's going to help you, basically. All right? So if you wanted to make k equal to x minus y, you would have 4k cubed minus k. You could work with that, factorize it, and then sub in the x minus y again at the end.
Just factorize.
Yeah.
I find out.
So when you do that, you will probably get a trinomial that you would have to factorize. I just have to look at that. Well, yeah, because before you multiply out, you first have to factorize. Unless multiplying out is going to allow you. Right, guys, so let's look at my x minus y. This is different to 2 squares, right? Which is what I did there. Then I just multiplied by 2 in, and I got that. Any questions on that one? So it's fine to do this.
The 7 hour
I'm sure, yeah. And you so switched. Yeah, it's a bit. It's a little bit anxious. All right, guys, there is it.
Sure.
What's up?
I have to go further.
What do you mean? You didn't have to go further? Yeah, I checked.
I think we'll get it off now.
Oh, no. What are we talking about now? X? Yeah. Oh, no, I don't mind, sorry.
Yeah, I'm
I raised
not.
it, and then I did this one, but I did on the different. But no one.
Oh, you grouped it.
Yo, something.
Yeah, so you wouldn't have to because it's not just this is not a different.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be wrong.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. So I would just leave it like that because you can't actually factorize that law unless I miss something.
Yes, ma'am, I wrote that down. I got it. Even my.
I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, guys, for that one, I know. Yes. Yeah, are we fine with the switcher on? Okay, yes?
Yeah.
And then I took out x squared minus 3 as a kind of bracket. And I was left with x squared minus 3 squared plus 2x. Now guys, if you look at this is not a difference of 2 squares, right? So I decided, okay, let's multiply this bracket up because you are anyway not allowed to leave it like that. Okay, you will have to simplify the brackets within that second bracket. So then I got these 4 terms and I did check and I think you can't factorize it. Right, when I went through all the different options. I didn't check my answer in the solutions book, so let's just take a look with me. Yeah. 20 seconds. What exercise is this guy? 1.3. Exercise 1.3, number 5. Yes, let's do that. Daniel has one. Yes, guys, I have this answer in this. They use a substitution, but I don't think it was really. Oh, why do you guys so confused? Are you looking at Gmail? Oh, okay. Yeah, how you think? Yeah, so guys, in Jiggy, I mean, you didn't have to use the K method, but it made things much simpler. Again, we have a repeated bracket there, so I made that bracket equal to K. Then we ended up with this trinomial, which is now a more difficult one to factorize, right? But you are able to do that, I'm sure. Now you just need to remember that when you now factorize K to the 4, you're going to have K squared in your two brackets, right? That's important. And in this first bracket, K squared minus 1 is the difference of two squares. The second one is not, there's a plus in between them, right? So we can't factorize that. So then from here, I now substituted back that x minus 1 for k. Alright, so k plus 1 becomes x minus 1 plus 1, right? Because we said that k was x minus 1. So the next bracket, k minus 1 becomes x minus 1 minus 1. And then for this one, 2k squared is 2x minus 1 squared plus 1. And then you just need to simplify from there, basically. So x minus 1 plus 1, that's 0, right? So that just becomes x. So second bracket, minus 1 is minus 2. Then I squared my bracket using that binomial, squaring binomial shortcut, and then I multiplied the 2 in. And then all I did from there was I just simplified the 2 and the 1. Now I wonder, can that be factorized though? No, it's not. Yeah, so you would have to check that though, guys, right? So you see that this is a trinomial at the end here, and this is actually one that can't be factorized, which is a bit difficult to spot when there's that 2 in front, right? But this was actually the final answer. Again, possible 80 question, not a full question, right? They weren't giving something like this. In fact, in core, if they're giving you questions like this where it's like a funny trinomial, it will be an easy one to factor. It won't be one where there's like a 2 in front, and it definitely won't be a 1 to the power of 4. Right. Same one, so. Haven't moved very far. And then H was very long, but actually not that bad. And guys, H is something that you could get it for as well. It was a difference of 2 cubes. Now, I suppose if you wanted to, you could replace the a plus 2b and the a minus 2b, two different variables if you wanted to, right? You could do like an x and a y, and then factorize that and then replace them, but you don't have to. So guys, remember, when you're factorizing a difference of 2 cubes, you take the cube root of the first term minus the cube root of the second term. Then you use your first bracket, which is a binomial, but now because we have, we have 2 brackets there. You use that to get the next bracket, you square your first term, multiply these 2 terms and change the sign, and then you square your last term. And then all that was left after that was basically just to simplify these 2 square brackets, right? By multiplying out, selecting the right terms. And in the end, you got a bracket that you couldn't factorize again. So, yeah, it was just a one factorizing thing, but a lot of them multiplying and simplifying stuff. What? Thank you. 5 minutes left in the lesson. Don't worry, I'm Thank you. I do have it. Yes, I'll show you quickly. I don't think it will take too long tomorrow. Guys, any questions on this? Like I said, I'm going to take pictures of all of these cool solutions. I'll put them on Google Classroom. So if you missed something, you can go look at it there. I just don't have another one like that, but exercise. See if we can find something. All right, guys, exercise 1.4. This was on those compound fractions, so let's just mark this one quickly. So remember, the way of getting rid of all those fractions is by multiplying each term, every single term, at the top and at the bottom, by the LCD of all the inner fractions, smaller fractions. So the first one, that was x squared. So you multiply the top by x squared and the bottom, you end up with these expressions. At the top there you have a trinomial which you can factorize to x minus 1, x minus 1. It's fine if you write them as two brackets, guys. You don't have to write them as squared. And then when you cancel that out, if you have this, right, then you're left with x minus 1. Again, this is a typical AP question, not a typical 4 question, but from there on, you can get that in 4, right? That type of fraction is simplified. All right, C was a little bit more complicated. The LTD was XY in this case. So at the top, you ended up with a difference of 2 squares, and at the bottom with a trinomial. Let me know if you guys have any questions, if you want me to go through any of those steps. Okay, and then in the last minute that we have, we can, oh dear, I was supposed to, no, it's fine.
I don't want. I want.
A 1? Oh, no. Okay, I think we did something wrong. What happened? Can someone find it? The second to last thing, yeah. Oh, I see. Thank you. There we go. Yes, thank you so much. So this is supposed to be a plus. There we go. Thank you. Which makes that a plus. And then we end up with 1. Thank you. Okay, guys, just listen up quickly. There are some 2 minutes left, so don't please all run off. So, tomorrow you will be doing 4 again. Tomorrow is running on a Friday timetable, right? You will be doing tomorrow. We are basically done with the first chapter in AP. This is all the algebra stuff. It's just one last, and a solve universal triangle. I know. It's a bit of an extensive thing, though. It's not really part of the syllabus, but we will chat about it. And you'll see when we do it, I'll show you kind of how you can apply it. So let me just check. So on Monday, we use on Monday we will be doing 8, all right? And on Tuesday you have your 4 texts. That's fine with everyone? So tomorrow is going to be 4 lectures in the stand. We're going to teach you again some exciting stuff. Make sure that you know what's in the text, but we can also chat on Monday and make sure that you all know exactly what we need to study for Tuesday text. Yes. On Monday we do have to do 8. Wait, tomorrow we have to teach something or after. I'm not sure what it's that. Okay, guys, we can go ahead and on this day. No, it's going through.
Okay, few questions. I don't really know.
Okay, yeah.
So was that the right correction?
So this was supposed to be 4x squared minus 9, not a 2x squared. You squared the
Yes.
x, not the 2.
Okay, so that one, and then this one.
That was the same as the one that we looked at. This is actually a trinomial that you would have to factorize for.
Yeah, okay. And then over here, I struggle so much with this, with the,
Yeah, so it would be easier. So I just suggest take out the 2 first.
Yeah.
Because then it's much easier because you had to work with such big numbers here and it was really difficult to get it.
yeah.
So take out the 2 first, then it's a p squared minus 9p minus
take up
90.
two common
Yes, and then it would be simpler to do that, because what you have here,
Yes.
just check, 2 times 6 is 12, and 1 times 30 is 30. You said 30 minus 12 is 18.
Yeah, I
It
kind of
would
just
be,
want
oh,
to
you see what's happening. So you identified the correct ones, but those must go in a bracket together. And those, so the 2p and the 30 must be in a bracket, and the p and the
Oh, so it goes like that. So okay.
yes. So you
And
do the
then
multiplication like that, with the bracket.
here, what did I?
Have to take out 2 again.
Yeah. Come on. Okay, that was another function. Yeah, I have no. Like,
So this is a difference of 2 cubes. See, so you have to follow that whole.
no,
thing.
but then
Take
I
the
started to
root
do
of
that,
each of
but
them.
then what's,
So that has to be a minus as well.
no, I know, but then what's,
Then from there
something
you
squared,
use-
TDB 26.
Square that one.
Mm-hmm.
So you would do 4p minus 3. Square the first, so you get 16 squared. For the middle term, you're welcome. You multiply them together, which is negative 12p, but then you change the sign.
Yes,
And
and
then
then it
you
was,
square that, so that's already.
so now that I forgot how to do that, okay, and then,
Yeah, and this was just your middle term, for your middle term with a binomial that you're squaring, you have to double it. So
Oh,
you
so
have to
it's
do the
12.
product and then double, yeah. And it's
oh,
just that.
okay, thank
So it's not like terrible mistakes,
Yeah,
but
okay.
just, yeah, things you can work on. Alright,
For those, I haven't. Time to do it.
so
And it
yeah,
takes too long, background, don't have enough time to like study.
yeah.
For example, we had a crap one today,
Mm.
and I had to study physics homework.
Okay, as long as you're just staying up to date and you are able to do it.
I'm gonna do it, finish all the work this week. So I got
So is it coming off now or when?
no, I'm just gonna it off. So not good.
Okay, and then for the test on Tuesday, will you be able to write that? Okay, I wonder if this get a scribe for you. Should I try and organize that for you for Tuesday? So then you write in a different venue with the scribe. Okay, cool. I'll email Mr. Anderson about that now. No problem.